Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. Welcome to Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. The case of the two men convicted of mischief and weapons charges stemming from the 2022 Coutts border blockade was back in Lethbridge court. We have the details. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre continues to tour the country and brought his Axe the Tax message to a mill. And our agriculture sector may be hurt as China looks to retaliate against Canada's tariffs on their EVs.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. The sentencing hearing for Anthony Olenek and Chris Carbert, otherwise known as the Coutts 2, continued Tuesday in Lethbridge. The court is looking over their findings of facts from the jury's initial verdict back on August the 2nd. BCN's Landon Hickok has more details from the Lethbridge courthouse about what was discussed.
The sentencing hearing is underway for Chris Carbert and Anthony Olenek as the court determines to find the facts that the jury made on their verdicts of the two men. They have both been acquitted of the most serious charge of conspiring to murder police officers back at the Coutts border blockade in winter of 2022. They have been found guilty of other charges such as possession of a firearms for a dangerous purpose to the public peace, mischief over $5,000, and Olenek separately unlawful possession of an explosive. Now on Monday, Justice David Lebrance drew criticism on one of the defense lawyers, Marilyn Burns, by stating that she was implying that the jury had rushed their decisions on a late Friday night on August the 2nd due to the fact that it was a long weekend coming up. She also drew criticism from the Crown, stating that on the weapons charge there might have been some cultural bias, while not implying what she meant. Crown Prosecutor Stephen Johnston replied that it had to do with an urban bias and that the city folk does not understand how the rural community uses firearms. Justice David Lebrance also gave his statement of finding the facts on Tuesday. This only took about an hour before he dismissed the court, adjourned the court for the day, pardon me. In his statement, he made his observations that he believes without a reasonable doubt that Carbert and Olenek were prepared to use a certain amount of force, although not clarifying how much force, due to the amount of firearms and ammunitions that they brought to the Coutts border blockade, and rejected the notion that they were to use it strictly for hunting coyotes and for showing off the friends. He rejected that notion due to the amount of firearms and ammunition, as well as text messages to friends and family, including Chris Carbert's messages to his mother saying that, and I'm paraphrasing here, but the sooner that you wake up to what I'm doing, the sooner you realize what I have to do. And after a rather short court session on Tuesday, we'll have Wednesday off before we return for Justice David Lebrance to give his final sentencing on the two men on Thursday or Friday, and we will finally know the fates of Anthony Olenek and Chris Carbert 2.5 years after their initial arrest. For Bridge City News, I'm Landon Hickok.
More than $900,000 worth of contraband and unauthorized items have been seized at a prison in Edmonton. The Correctional Service of Canada says the items, which include THC, crystal meth, and cell phones, were confiscated last week by staff at the maximum security prison. The agency says the police have been notified and the institution is investigating. It says it uses a number of tools to prevent drugs from entering its jails, such as ion scanners and drug detector dogs. Apparently, however, sometimes they can slip through the cracks. Police in Nanton are asking for our help as two people are believed to be missing. 24-year-old Desiree Diavila and her daughter 3-year-old Chastity were last seen in Nanton on August the 22nd. It's believed that they were headed to Castlegar, British Columbia. They may be driving a 2011 silver Kia Rio with an Alberta license plate CSJ 0467. Nanton RCMP are asking if you've seen them to call them right away at 403-646-5722 or call Crime Stoppers at 1-800-222-8477. You know, vandalism should never be tolerated under any circumstances. But that's exactly what happened recently in Lethbridge at a Pride crosswalk. According to police, a 17-year-old laid rubber on the crosswalk in the form of a burnout with his truck. He's since been arrested and charged. BCN spoke to the chair of Lethbridge Pride Fest, Cassandra Fayette, who offered her thoughts after she received the news about the damage.
Unfortunately, it is something that we've been encountering since we've started doing the Pride crosswalks. Every year there's been some form of vandalism to them, so it is unfortunately something that we've come to expect, but it was nice to learn that the situation is being handled by LPS without us having to approach them about it. These actions do need to be held accountable, because if people learn that they can continue to do those sorts of things without any repercussions, they're going to continue to do it.
The 17-year-old is charged with mischief under $5,000. He was released from custody and is scheduled to appear in youth court on November the 13th. Federal Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre took his Axe the Tax message to a lumber mill. When speaking with workers at the plant, they say around 200 jobs will be lost at their mill if the federal government ends up hiking the carbon tax to 61 cents per litre of fuel.
It's going to go up to 61 cents a litre over the next 5 years if Trudeau and the NDP get back in. How does that do your business? Lots of red. I'll put it in that one.
Well, put us out of business.
Yeah, that would be how many people lose their jobs then?
200 directly, and how
How
many?
500 people gotten out of work? It's going to grind the economy to a halt.
Right.
Because basically, our truckers are the lifeblood of the economy. Our highways are the vein. That's where all the goods and services move around, right? If you jack up carbon tax to 61 cents a litre, those trucks stop rolling, and the products stop moving, and the jobs disappear, and the goods that you put on your dinner table or in your home are gone. At least this lumber no longer goes into building homes. That's what's at stake. That's how devastating and how big an existential threat the carbon tax is to everything and our entire way of life.
As you've heard on Bridge City News, the federal government, in an effort to protect Canadian jobs, is putting a 100% tariff on Chinese-made electric vehicles. There's talk now, however, that in retaliation, China may impose tariffs once again on Canadian agriculture products, including our canola. According to political reporter Brian Lilly, that would be very tough on our producers here in the prairies.
Would expect agriculture, which is one of our biggest exports, along with coal, iron, and copper. Those are the things that we've got to watch out for the next little while. But, I've heard some people say we shouldn't be trying to protect the auto industry at the expense of agriculture. They will undermine us on agriculture as well. We have a major trade deficit with China. We can easily switch, like we did during the pandemic. Pork producers were able to switch to the Philippines and Mexico. Canola producers were able to switch to other jurisdictions. We should get off our reliance on China because they're not a reliable trading partner and they're not a fair and equal one.
Mr. Lilly will also discuss how the Trudeau government's new housing policy of using federal lands may make many people think of the Great Reset slogan, "You will own nothing and be happy." He'll explain coming up after Business News. International Trade Minister Mary Ng defended her government's decision to impose that 100% import tariff on Chinese electric vehicles. She says Canada stands for fair trade, paying workers properly, and maintaining strong environmental regulations.
They are subsidizing. They have a deliberate policy for overcapacity. Standing up for your workers and standing up for the industry was what yesterday's decision is about. But here's the thing I would also say. Canada is a country that is a open trade country, but a fair trade country. We have put a price on paying our workers fairly. This industry in the growing of electric vehicles are going to create jobs all around the country. In my own home province of Ontario, from Windsor to, all the way through into Oakville and into Quebec. I mean, these are, this is a vibrant industry that we are investing in to grow. We pay our workers and we have high environmental standards. Those are wired into the trade agreements that this government has negotiated time and time again.
Government House Leader Karina Gould chatted with reporters in Halifax on the final day of the federal cabinet's 3-day retreat in Halifax. A question was asked how the Trudeau Liberals are really approaching the fact that, according to the polls, Canadians want to see some change, as in a change in government. The latest polls had the Poilievre Conservatives with a 15 to 20 point lead over the Liberals.
I think the question, too, is it change for change's sake, or is it because we need to be doing something differently? When I talk to Canadians and when I talk to people in my constituency, for example, when I hear from seniors about dental care, they like that. They want that to continue. They recognize that if the Conservatives were to get into government, that probably will not continue. I was in a mom and baby yoga class, right? And I was talking to the people in my class. Many of them are getting the Canada Child Benefit, right? That is helping them with the high cost of living. Many of them are taking advantage of the 18-month parental leave that we put in place. And almost all of them are accessing the lower child care costs. They found a space and they're getting those lower child care costs.
A judge in Calgary has reversed a number of the limits that were placed on Medicine Hat Mayor Lindsay Clark. The judge also restored her salary in full, including back pay. Justice Rosemary Nations said council went too far with sanctions, even though Clark broke its code of conduct. The judge said Clark, however, did commit misconduct during her ongoing feud with the town manager, Ann Mitchell. The ruling also states that an apology from Clark is still required. Most of the sanctions were overkill, according to the judge, and that her full $144,000 salary needs to be reinstated after council decided to cut it in half. When council is in session next September 3rd, Clark will be back in the mayor's chair. Well, we've had a few more clouds roll into our region here in southwestern Alberta. Jeanette Rocher is now with an early look at the forecast. Jeanette, they appear to be rain clouds, bringing more of that much-needed moisture.
Yeah, well, if it's moisture we need, then we are sure going to get it on Wednesday. We're talking 5 to 10 millimeters of moisture, that is. So we are seeing this really strange day. In the midst of all of these warm days, we're looking at Wednesday, which is going to be clouds, rain, wind, up to 70 kilometer per hour winds at certain times of the day, particularly in the morning, and only a daytime high of 12 degrees at its warmest. So it's going to feel like winter tomorrow compared to this 27-degree day that we had today. But don't fear, because right after that on a Thursday, we are seeing another high of 24 degrees. And then as we get into Sunday and next Monday, we're back up in the high 20s and low 30s again. So it's going to be summer again soon. Don't worry before we get into September there. I'll be back later in the show with a full look at the 7-day forecast as well as the temperatures across the country. Hal?
Looking forward to it. Thanks so much, Jeanette. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky held a briefing in Kyiv on Tuesday where he talked about the recent Ukrainian military actions and his potential plans for the war against Russia moving forward.
Не окупації Сумщини і не окупації Чернігівщини. Мало того, розбила велику кількість військ. Я не знаю, чи комунікував сьогодні главком щодо кількості ворога. Я думаю, що не комунікував деталі. Ну, напевно, ще рано про це говорити. Розбила серйозне угруповання, велику кількість військ. Один із напрямків, де частина якого вже зроблена, це Курщина. А другий напрямок – це стратегічне місце України.
Zelensky also made remarks that he will present a plan to Biden, Harris, and Trump about a plan to end the war. The recent preemptive strike by the Israel Defense Forces on Hezbollah's military infrastructure inside of Lebanon may make the terrorist group more dangerous. Now, that's according to TBN Israel correspondent Yair Pinto, who has the latest.
Sunday morning's preemptive strike by the IDF caused massive damage to Hezbollah, despite the attempt by Sheikh Hassan Nasrallah to dismiss it, while his claims that the IDF bases were damaged is easily proven false. However, there are some worrying signs that Hezbollah is extending the range of its attacks into Israel and is threatening to launch even more destructive attacks against the Jewish state in the days ahead. Meanwhile, Hamas let us know that they're still here by firing a long-range rocket at Rishon LeZion near Tel Aviv in the heart of Israel. Security operations continue in Judea and Samaria with an unusual attack reported near Bethlehem, just south of Jerusalem. In diplomatic news, the negotiations for a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip and the return of the remaining Israeli hostages appear to have fallen apart, with Hamas refusing to budge on the issue of hostages and Israel refusing to cave into demands for a withdrawal from the Philadelphia corridor bordering between Gaza and Egypt.
Healthcare professionals across North America have expressed concern about a potentially deadly mosquito. They say this particular pest has been spreading the eastern equine encephalitis, otherwise known as triple E. The rare but deadly disease has even forced the closures of parks and fields in certain parts of Massachusetts. 4 other towns in the region are also urging people to avoid going out at night right now.
Eastern equine encephalitis is short term, is triple E, is a virus infection carried by mosquitoes that can cause, very rarely causes disease in humans. And when it does cause a infection is very, very severe. Although it's a very rare infection, we have no treatment for it to do this. And if once someone gets it, it's just all we can do is provide supportive care, and it can kill people. Well, this is a virus which is present in the environment in southern New England. So there are cases in Massachusetts, cases in Rhode Island, cases in Connecticut. Tends to be areas that where a certain kind of mosquito lives. That tends to be areas that used to be swampland that's been converted, and less swampy now, but the mosquitoes still find good habitat.
Organizers of the Jasper Folk Music Festival say this year's event has been canceled. A statement on social media by the festival says due to the wildfires, it was in the best interest of everyone involved to cancel. Organizers said that they were hoping the event would have united the community following the recent devastating wildfire that destroyed close to 1/3 of the town's buildings. The online statement says ticket holders who would like a refund have been contacted directly. As for active wildfires, Alberta Wildfires says there are currently 75 of them burning here in Alberta. Fortunately, only 1 is listed out of control in the high-level forest area. 44 are under control and 30 are being held. Firefighters have been able to extinguish around 1,029 wildfires so far this year. The majority are located in the high-level Fort McMurray and Slave Lake forest regions. You know, many of us love our corn, especially as a summer food. Even one of the Southern Alberta festivals, the Tabor Corn Fest, pays homage to corn. Now, what, however, makes Tabor corn so special around the world? James Johnson, owner and grower of Johnson Fresh Farms, explains why Tabor corn is so unique. Johnson says there are also challenges in growing his very popular corn.
The climate that we happen to have here in MD of Tabor. We have a lot of really hot days with cool nights. So the cool nights bring out the sugar and the sweetness in the corn. And then a combination of our irrigation water that comes down from the mountains just makes really good tasting sweet corn. And so that's how we become, world famous and I guess the corn capital of Canada. Actually, it'll be for sweet corn a little bit below average crop, just because of the rain and the cold, wet spring we had. We really push trying to get our crop planted so it grows really fast so we can start our season. And in a cold, wet spring like this, it was tough on our corn that we planted early.
And I'd like to place an order for some more of that Tabor peaches and cream corn, please. Research indicates that corn is fairly healthy and is a low glycemic index food. That means it's digested slowly and does not cause harmful spikes in blood sugar. Well, it was a terrific Tuesday with plenty of warmth, but also lots of cloud cover. More clouds are on the way on Wednesday, but this time with a chance of showers developing. Full weather details are on deck. We enjoyed another beautiful summer day here in Lethbridge as we hovered right around the mid-20s. Jeanette Rocher is now with a full look at the weather forecast. Jeanette, some rain clouds, however, may be headed our way, cooling things off just a little bit.
Oh yeah, more than just to cool things off a bit. I say take a winter jacket with you tomorrow and an umbrella because it's going to be chilly and very, very wet. So we're seeing 5 to 10 millimeters of rain, up to 70 km/h wind gusts, a high of only 12 degrees. So, I mean, if you're kind of over summer by now and are excited for fall, tomorrow might be your day. But just that one day only, except for the rain there and the wind. Then we're going to be back into sunshine and 24 degrees on Thursday, up to 28 on Friday, 21 and partly cloudy skies on Saturday. Sunshine on Sunday and Monday. And look at those temperatures, 29 degrees and 32 degrees on Monday. That says we're getting into the month of September already, so it's a pretty good way to start September in my opinion, unless you are just so excited for that fall weather. But don't worry, because it is coming. It's just around the corner. Average high for this time of year, 24 degrees, average low 9, 36. That was our record high on this day, happening back in 1962, and the record low happened in way back 1911. 2 degrees was the record high. Hard to believe they were keeping records like that way back then. 6:41 is when the sun rose this morning. Sun set this evening at 8:23. So we are at 13 hours and I don't know, what is that, 41 minutes? There we go. On the west coast tomorrow, 20 degrees for a high in Victoria, seeing mainly sunny skies, feeling like 16 by the water though. 19 clearing skies in Vancouver. Edmonton looking at up to 5 millimeters of rain there, 16 for the high. And in Calgary, also chilly there for tomorrow. 12 degrees, get this, 15 to 25 millimeters of rain there. So they're even more wet than Lethbridge is. Also up to 80 kilometer per hour winds in Calgary. So also more windy than Lethbridge. So in Saskatoon and Regina tomorrow, seeing a 30% chance of showers, risk of thunderstorms in both of those cities. 20 for the high in Saskatoon. Regina sitting in a high of 21 tomorrow. 26 the expected high in Winnipeg tomorrow, with sunshine and some scattered clouds later on in the day there. As we get into the central part of the country, Toronto sitting at 25 degrees, overcast skies. Looks like could see some thunderstorms later on in the day. 30% chance of showers in Ottawa, 21 for the high, 22 in Montreal. Montreal seeing showers ending in the morning. As we get to Fredericton, looking at 5 millimeters of rain expected there, 21 for the high, 21 as well. In Halifax, seeing some late day showers. 2 to 4 millimeters expected in Charlottetown, high of 23 degrees and a mix of sun and cloud. In St. John's, also 23 there. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
The head of the union representing workers at our two major railways says a labor demonstration was planned for today during the federal cabinet retreat. Teamsters Canada Rail Conference President Paul Boucher is in Halifax a day after 9,300 Canadian National Railway and CPKC rail workers were forced back to work, ending a 4-day work stoppage. On Saturday, the Federal Labor Board sent their separate contract disputes to binding arbitration after Labor Minister Stephen McKinnon said the impasse was putting Canadian businesses and trade relationships at risk. Boucher says the forced end to the work stoppage fundamentally takes away the rights to free collective bargaining. Pilots with Air Canada held demonstrations outside of a number of Canadian airports, including in Vancouver, Toronto, and Montreal. The demonstrations came just a week after the Airline Pilots Association voted overwhelmingly to approve a strike mandate, putting them in a position to walk off the job as early as September the 17th. The pilots are fighting for better wages, retirement benefits, and other quality of life improvements. The average Air Canada captain who flies a wide-body plane makes anywhere between $315,000 and $350,000 a year. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was down 69 points on the day to finish at 23,259. The Dow was up almost 10 points to 41,250. The S&P 500 was up almost 9 on the day to 5625, and the Nasdaq was up 29 points to 17,754. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down $1.89 to $75.53 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 4 cents to $1.92 US. Gold was up $9.31 on the day to $25.2477 US an ounce, and silver was up 11 cents to $29.97 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $7.35 per bushel, barley's at $5.44, canola's at $13.68, and corn is at $7.16 per bushel. Live cattle were up $1.58 to $185.18. Feeder cattle were down 30 cents to $244.20, and lean hogs were up $1.33 to $102.80. The Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours to 74.40 US. Recapping one of our top stories, the sentencing hearing for Anthony Olenek and Chris Carbert continued at the Lethbridge Courthouse. The court exchanged their findings of fact from the jury's verdict of the two men back on August the 2nd. Defense lawyer Marilyn Burns faced criticism on her comments Monday, claiming the jury might have rushed their verdict decisions due to the long weekend approaching. She also says there may have been a cultural bias in the jurors' judgments. Justice David Lebrun's made his finding of fact statement on Tuesday before adjourning the court until Thursday. A sentencing decision is expected to be announced sometime on Friday. There could be some serious repercussions for our agriculture industry as China may retaliate from the recent tariffs the federal government is imposing on Chinese EVs. Political reporter Brian Lilly will have more details for us momentarily. When you see news happening in your community, please drop us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. Also, be sure to visit our website anytime to check out a number of stories and interviews. The Prime Minister is meeting with his cabinet at a retreat in Halifax. Now, what's interesting is how Justin Trudeau opened things up by apparently reversing one of his own positions and adopting a position held by Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre. Now, to chat about this in more detail is Sun political columnist Brian Lilly, who joins us once again from Toronto. Now, Brian, this has something to do with the federal government's temporary foreign workers program?
Yes, they are effectively reversing all the changes that we talked about a little while ago, the ones they made back in April of 2022. Remember, we discussed how just after they signed the coalition agreement, the Supply and Confidence coalition agreement with the NDP, the party of the workers, the Trudeau Liberals just took the temporary foreign workers program and put it on steroids. They got rid of requirements that would curtail the ability to bring in a temporary foreign worker when unemployment went above 6%. They removed a cap of only having 10% of your workforce come from this program and allowed it to go up to 20% in all industries, 30% in some other industries like hospitality, hospitals, nursing homes, construction. So they really let this program fly, and we've seen the effects of it and a lot of criticisms. So now they're saying, oh, well, we're going to bring back in the bit about, making it tougher if unemployment's above 6%, which it has been for the last little while across the country. You can't have 30% of your workforce be from this program, and a host of other things that they're going to bring back. This is effectively reversing the policy that's been in place for more than 2 years, the policy that has been critiqued for more than a year, and one that, in standard Liberal fashion, if you were to critique it, well, then what you'd be called. But now the Prime Minister is saying he's going to reverse it. What's interesting, Hal, is he's not taking responsibility. Sometimes you see politicians, Doug Ford here in Ontario, the Premier's a great example. When he reverses, he goes out and he says, I'm sorry, I got it wrong. Justin Trudeau went out and he blamed the business community for this. Well, it was the business community that asked for this, and the business community needed it, and we're changing it now. He always acts like he's not responsible, like he hasn't been the one in charge for 9 years. So interesting that he's doing this. I'm not sure that voters who are upset by this, and there are many, are going to actually say, well, it's okay now because he's changed. He's not admitting responsibility.
Does this mean that certain people who join the program will have to leave Canada now? I mean, some groups of foreign workers and students have said they're not leaving.
This is going to be a fascinating element because we've also had Mark Miller, the immigration minister in the Trudeau government, say, well, look, if we have too many temporary residents in the form of temporary foreign workers, one solution is to just make them permanent residents. Well, wait a minute, that doesn't solve the issue. That's just changing what they're called. But yes, some groups have said, no, we will not go back. There have been protests in Brampton outside of Toronto and Prince Edward Island and elsewhere. And groups of both foreign workers and international students saying, you know what, we have the right to work here, we have the right to stay here, and we're not going anywhere. Now, that's detached from reality as far as the way the law, the regulations are written. That doesn't mean the Trudeau government won't change its mind and come up with some solution that does this. I mean, they are open to the idea of open borders, even if Canadians aren't.
Now, Prime Minister Trudeau, Brian, was also asked if he would consider dropping the number of permanent residents coming each year as well, not just for foreign workers and students. Now, he didn't say yes, but he also didn't say no.
I don't know how to read this, Hal, because, as you say, he didn't say yes, he didn't say no. He was asked about it twice. He was non-committal, said these are things that we're looking at. The Trudeau Liberals have been determined to drive up Canada's number of permanent residents every year to 500,000. It's become a bit of a matter of faith for them. And of course, the Trudeau government was advised by Dominic Barton, the former guy from McKinsey, Canada's former ambassador to China. He believes that Canada should have a population of 100 million by the end of this century. He's been part of the group that has advised the government on that. And so they seem determined to bring people in faster than we can absorb them, in the words of the Prime Minister, as opposed to previous governments have let things ebb and flow depending on how things have gone. Even his own father used to raise and lower the immigration threshold each year based on things like the unemployment rate, housing starts. Trudeau hasn't done that. So is he just trying to play coy with his answer in being non-committal, or is he actually going to say, you know what, that 500,000 a year, it sounded good, but it's tougher than we think. If he does do it, don't expect him to take responsibility. Don't expect him to say he made a mistake. He'll blame somebody else and act like he wasn't in charge if he makes changes.
Now, Trudeau also announced that the federal government will be bringing in 100% tariffs on Chinese-made electric vehicles, Brian, along with some smaller tariffs on steel and aluminum. Is this not a policy that Pierre Poilievre promoted weeks ago? I mean, it appears as though Trudeau is taking more pages from the Poilievre playbook.
Pierre Poilievre was talking about this a few weeks ago now. He was in Hamilton at Stelco, the steel mill there, and standing in front of workers said, look, China is undermining our economy. They're undermining your jobs, and we need to do something. And a lot of free trade purists will say, oh, this is awful. This is horrible economic policy. You can't do it. Look, China does not play on the same level playing field as the rest of us. They are not free traders. They want access to our markets, and they block access to theirs. And that is a major problem. So, yeah, Poilievre said he would follow the American lead. Trudeau's followed the American lead, but only somewhat. You know, things like computer chips, they have not put a tariff in on yet. Other items they haven't done, but they have brought in a 25% tariff on Chinese steel and aluminum and 100% tariff on Chinese-made EVs. So if I understand correctly, there was already a 6.1% tariff on Chinese electric vehicles. This will make it 106.1% tariff on Chinese-made electric vehicles. And the reason this is important is China uses their economic might to try and flood markets. They're trying to flood Europe with their products. They're trying to flood North America. And that undermines the ability of our companies to thrive and sell. And you know, you can call it protectionism if you want, but this $12,000 Chinese electric vehicle that they're selling in the United States, I'm told it costs about $25,000 to make. So the Chinese government is subsidizing it by more than half and then trying to push it into the American market so that no American company can compete. American plants and by extension, Canadian plants end up shutting down, and we're reliant on China for our vehicles. There's also questions about whether the connected aspects of it, such as your GPS, or connecting your phone to it, will be sending information back to China. There are serious people who have written that this is a major national security threat for all of North America. This is a good move by the Prime Minister, even if it took him too long and he didn't go as far as he should.
We're looking at replacing some tires on a couple of our vehicles here. And speaking of flooding the market, so many Chinese tires. It's unbelievable when I call all the different tire shops. Where's it made? China, China, China. I'm like, unbelievable. It's crazy. Now, Brian, China could retaliate by imposing tariffs on Canadian goods, specifically our agriculture sector. Should producers really be concerned?
Yeah, they should, because we've seen back in 2016, for example, China put tariffs. We were in a bit of a trade spat with them. They put tariffs and other economic barriers on canola. I remember at one point they were just refusing shipments. So shipments would get all the way to the port and then they say, oh, it's rancid, it's no good. Or this doesn't meet the quality of our local rapeseed, which of course anyone that knows the product knows that's not true. Canola is, by the way, our #1 export, but we're very high in pork. Now, so, you know, if you're a canola producer in the prairies, yeah, you should probably be a little bit worried. I don't want to give advice to the Chinese, but, you know, the Prime Minister doesn't have a whole lot of votes across the prairies. If they want to hit Justin Trudeau, they would look at something like pork. Pork is a major export to China, more than $1 billion a year. And, you know, most of that is the biggest chunk is Quebec, then Ontario, then Manitoba. Those are places Trudeau has seats. So that would hurt him politically more. Either way, I would expect agriculture, which is one of our biggest exports, along with coal, iron, and copper. Those are the things that we've got to watch out for the next little while. But, you know, I've heard some people say we shouldn't be trying to protect the auto industry at the expense of agriculture. They will undermine us on agriculture as well. We have a major trade deficit with China. We can easily switch, like we did during the pandemic. Pork producers were able to switch to the Philippines and Mexico. Canola producers were able to switch to other jurisdictions. We should get off our reliance on China because they're not a reliable trading partner and they're not a fair and equal one.
Brian, Prime Minister Trudeau recently released a video with the new housing policy of using federal lands. Now, you say this policy makes you think of the Great Reset slogan, "You will own nothing and be happy." Why is that?
Well, because Trudeau, this is another case of him adopting a conservative policy. This was a policy that was in the conservative election platform under Aaron O'Toole and I believe under Andrew Scheer. And Pierre Poilievre has kept it. And he says, look, we're going to take surplus federal lands and have homes built on them. Trudeau has, kind of said, Poilievre doesn't have any housing plans. He's got no ideas. Well, now he's stealing this one. But instead of selling it, he says you can lease the land. So they will lease the land out to build homes on it. Well, does that mean they're just going to build rental homes on this, which you need? You need to have rental homes. But there's a ton of surplus land. Just having rental homes, well, that means you're not going to own your home. You'll own nothing and be happy. Is it just going to be condos where you own part of it, but not all? It's very confusing. But in this video, he also disparages the idea of selling off land to developers and makes it sound like that will just make the government a quick buck, but do nothing for you. What Trudeau obviously fails to understand, or hopes that people like me don't look into, is that we have a whole federal crown corporation whose main mission is to do this. It's called the Canada Lands Corporation. And if you look at projects like Garrison Woods in Calgary, they took an old military base, redid it. They're in the middle of doing that in Ottawa, in CFB Rockcliffe. It's being redeveloped. That's a short drive from where Justin Trudeau lives, or Rivers Walk in Chilliwack, British Columbia. These are places where surplus federal lands were turned into housing developments. And yes, some of it was affordable housing, but most of it was a design of homes that people could buy. And if you open that up, make it easier for development to happen, that should help with home affordability. But Trudeau wants to make it sound like owning a home is a bad idea. Developers are bad. Let's get into class warfare and let's just lease land because you shouldn't own it anyway. Other than him, he of course owns, several properties.
Brian, the Prime Minister was asked about his future and if he should maybe pull a Joe Biden and step aside. What did Trudeau have to say?
He talked about how much respect he has for Joe Biden. He talked about how they're friends. He was dismissive of the idea that he has to go, though. He talked about how he's got so much more to offer. He's got more fight left in him, that he wants to keep delivering for Canadians. When he talks about delivering for Canadians, and I look at the polling and I look at how Canadians feel about his government, I'm reminded of that line from The Princess Bride. You keep using that word. I don't think it means what you think it means, because Canadians don't seem to think Justin Trudeau is delivering for them. So he doesn't appear that he wants to go anywhere. This has been, a year now that people have been having this debate. Is Justin Trudeau going to stay or go? I'm still firmly in the camp that says he's going to stay.
Now, despite the federal Liberals being about 20 points behind the Tories in recent polls, you say that Pierre Poilievre and the Tories should not become too complacent, Brian. Why is that?
Well, 3 points on that, and I'm sure you've heard me make these points before. Voters are fickle, polls change, and campaigns matter. We're 14 months out from the election. 14 months ago, the two parties were a lot closer in the polls. At that point, they'd started to pull away. But you go back a little bit more, say 16 months, roughly. They were tied. They were tied in the polls 16 months ago. There's enough time for something to happen. And when I watched the Prime Minister come out for his media availability on Monday morning, I went, he's performing well. You don't have to agree with him, but as someone that observes politicians, just see when they're having a good day, when they're having a bad day, when they're on game, when they're not. Um, for the last while, I've seen Justin Trudeau come out and he's been argumentative at times and bitter and taking the bait. He was calm, cool, and collected, giving a great performance. And, he may not win me over, Hal, but elections are won and lost by who can connect with swing voters. And right now, Pierre Poilievre has an awful lot of them, and he's won people over. It doesn't mean it's going to stay that way. And Trudeau showing up the way he did in Halifax tells me he wants to fight. He's planning to stick around and fight. He wants to prove to the world that he can beat Poilievre. That's his mindset right now. And so the Conservatives can't be complacent and say, well, we're 15 to 20 points up. We've got it in the bag. We can get sloppy. We can be lazy. No, if they do that, they'll lose the election. Wouldn't be the first time that someone this far out, very well ahead, lost the election. I've seen it happen provincially and federally in the past. So the Conservatives have to be careful that it doesn't happen to them.
Political reporter and Sun columnist Brian Lilley, thanks so much for joining us today from Toronto.
Thank you, Hal.
There are many people who really admire vintage cars and trucks that have been restored, including yours truly, or kept in immaculate original condition. I mean, so many of the vehicles of the 50s, 60s, and 70s have such character. Joining us to chat about this and a little bit more is Tal Meidinger with the Lethbridge Car Club, the LeBaron's Car Club. Tal, welcome to Bridge City News.
Well, thank you for having me.
So Tal, first of all, what is the LeBaron's Car Club really all about?
Oh, that's a big question. There's a lot of history in the club. We've been around since the early 60s. It's about camaraderie for the common interests of all kinds of automobiles, doesn't matter what you like. There's some great people in the club. There's some people there that'll help you out. If you have a problem with your project, there's lots of experience with people that have been doing this for, I'd hate to say 50 plus years. There's some young guys that are in the club that are just starting out, and they're a great resource. Some of these older gentlemen, older people, but it's the people. I mean, the cars are the excuse or the reason, but it's the people. We got some really great people in our club, and a variety of cars. I mean, all manufacturers, all shapes, sizes, years. Yeah, it's quite the group.
I love hearing the stories too, Tal. Like, I talked to this one guy at a recent show on Shiny. He picked up his old Chevelle, a 68 Chevelle, at a Quonset in Pennsylvania, right, of all places. He brought it back, restored it, put about $50,000, $60,000 into it over the last 10 years. It's just amazing, the stories that you hear, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. We all have our childhood favorites, and some of us spend a lifetime trying to get it, right? Some of us have it. Like, I'm one person that has my car my very first car when I was 16. I have it. And there's a couple of those that are in the club that are the same way. They have their childhood cars, and then there's others that have their favorite all-time car and just haven't had the opportunity to get it yet. So
what is your classic car that you've had since you were 16? What is it?
It's a 1972 AMC Javelin.
Oh, a Javelin. That is incredible.
Yeah.
Is it the AMX or just the regular Javelin?
Regular SST Javelin.
Wow.
Javelin.
A 360? What's under the hood?
A 360, yeah, for now. But I've been collecting parts over for the last many years to build it like I wanted to when I was a kid. But then I couldn't afford it. So now I've got a bigger motor and other parts and pieces to build what I wanted.
So what are the requirements of joining your club then? Is it having a classic vehicle?
Not necessarily. A pure interest, for sure. You have to be interested in the car hobby. Having a collector car, having a car of some kind, street rod, a custom, a classic, is also very important because now you tend to feel more of the group, right? You can go to these show and shines, pull up with your car, you sit there and you meet new people and you talk with your buddies from the club and you tell stories about, oh, I remember having that when I was this, or I remember my dad's talking about that when he was young and that kind of stuff. So, oh yeah, you don't have to, definitely not, but it just helps you. It pulls you into the rest of the group.
In my family, it's the expression "Mopar or no car." Yeah, I mean, I love the Challengers, the Chargers, the Coutts. You know, I was watching Barrett Jackson auction the other day, and there was a 70 or was a 71 Cuda ragtop, numbers matching Hemi,
Hemi.
426 Hemi. I think it was in the plum crazy purple, in a ragtop, like I said, and went for over $1 million. It's just amazing how much some of these classic vehicles are bringing in now.
Oh, and that's where I feel what's happening is it's the people in their late 50s and 60s, the 50s and 60s people, the baby boomers, we'll call them the late baby boomers. They now have the financial means to get their favorite car, right? So when that car came out, that Cuda came out in 70 or 71 or whatever. Could you imagine if you were 16 and seen that car? I want that car. Now that you're 50 or 60 and you've had, a good life, you can financially afford it, then you go after it.
Yeah,
Right?
it
And
might
that's
be a few more years
some of
before I can afford the 1.5 million US for my dream car, that
Yeah.
71 Cuda ragtop. Let's circle back to some of the younger people joining your club, though. Why do you think younger people are attracted to some of these hot rods and these classic street machines?
That's a very interesting question. We don't see as many 20-year-olds. When I say younger, I'm over 60. So when I say younger, I mean 30s and 40s, like they're in their 30s or 40s. We got a couple of them there that are in their 30s, and they just like there's the nostalgia aspect of it. I don't know. Some of them have had a car member of their family, the uncle, their father, or even older brothers that are in the cars, and they're in the cars, and they kind of followed that path, we'll say. I mean, you got the younger guys and girls that are doing the imports and fixing them up and making some incredible pieces of art, we'll call them, because they're taking a street machine and making 600-700 horsepower out of a little 6-cylinder or 4-cylinder. It's amazing. I met some of these young fellows just in the last month or two. But our hobbies tend to circle around the 20s to the 70s cars. That's kind of our car club. That's where it works on it. So we don't see a lot of the 20-ish people getting into that era of car. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Is when you start building a car from scratch, it's a project that's 4, 5, 6, or even longer, period. The younger people like more now. Let's buy this part. Let's clean it up, fix it up, paint it, put it on our vehicle, but still maintain driving their vehicle, because their daily driver is their hot rod. Where we in our club, our hot rod is a project. It's a fun thing. We have other vehicles that we can use to drive around and do our daily business.
You know, it's incredible, the stories I hear again about people doing frame-off restorations for some of their classic vehicles. You know, pans, trunk, they have to put everything into it. And sometimes it takes years and tens of thousands of dollars. And trying to find the parts too, Tal. Let's talk about that. Where do you get the parts?
Yeah, if you're building a Ford, Chevy, I'm going to talk about the 30s and the 40s, let's say, and 50s. If you're building a Ford or Chevy, part reproductions are pretty good. They're available. The Chrysler products, there are still lots, but not nearly as much as the Ford and the Chevy. So that's easy to find. If you're building what they call orphan cars, let's say a Studebaker or a Nash, those you got to start networking with people to find parts. And in some cases, those are very difficult to find, and that takes some time.
Oh, absolutely. Do your due diligence, do a little bit of investigative research here, especially online. Now, how about when it comes to building clone cars? Can you explain what those are?
Those clone cars, another name is tribute car, is they're basically duplicating an existing car that was built, let's say in 1969, something or another. They're taking a body that looks the same, and they're making it look like it was in 69. Like you'll take a 69 Mustang Shelby, and you can buy parts to make it look like a 69 Shelby. Or you can buy parts for a Nova, for example, and make it a Copo. That's an acronym. I'm not quite sure what it means, but or a Camaro, they can get the stickers, the badging, and it duplicates what it was back in the day, which is a very rare car. So,
But when you insure
yeah,
it, it's not going to be the value of a true SS, let's say a 69 Chevelle SS, because it's, like you said, a tribute or a clone car. As a matter of fact, I talked to an insurance adjuster once and asked him, what about these guys that put a lot of money into these old Fieros, like 84, 86 Fieros, to make them look like Ferraris? They spend a lot of money, you know, a lot of the body kits and so forth. He says, you know what happens, Hal, when they're in an accident? They're insured for an 84 or 86 Fiero. That's it.
yeah.
So that's kind of scary if you think about it. If somebody puts 50 or 60 grand into that car, you know, and they get into an accident, you're going to get the value of an 86 Fiero or 84 Fiero.
Yeah. I can't speak towards insurance because the insurance company I deal with is really good. I've had a few collector cars over the years, and sometimes different collector insurance places will insure it for what it is at the moment and not what it was. Okay. Like for instance, I had a 1928 Model A Ford Roadster pickup. It's a convertible truck. It was a street rod. If I would insure it for what it was if it was restored and what I had into it, there was a big difference in that, right? I would maybe have insured it for 12 or $15,000 because that's what a restored Model A is worth, give or take. Might be a little higher. My street rod, I had a lot more money into it, so it insured for a lot more, right?
So I guess it
So
really pays to shop around when it comes to insurance companies then, right?
it sure does, sure does.
Okay. Now, what are
Yeah.
your thoughts of Ford launching an electric SUV and calling it a Mustang? I mean, come on, Tal, that's not a Mustang. Or even Ford coming out with a four-cylinder Bronco, not the full-size Bronco with a 302 or 351 motor.
Okay, so you're talking to a Ford guy.
Okay, let's hear what you have to say.
You cut me. I bleed Ford blue. Yes, when they start naming an electric car a Mustang, that's just not right. I know the marketing behind it and why they've done it, but no, it's not a Mustang. It's an electric car. Call it what you want.
And how about
Right.
the Bronco, little four-cylinder Bronco? I mean, come on, that's Bronco Light. That's not a real Bronco, is it?
That's a good point. Bronco Light is probably the right word. I don't know if that's been turbocharged and all kinds of whizziness, but I think what they're trying to do is they're trying to create a product for the masses, right? So if somebody wants a Bronco just to drive around town, no off-roading, the four-cylinder probably gets them the fuel economy they want. So you get the next person that wants a Bronco to be used as a Bronco, then they got the 5 liter and whatever else to give them the horsepower, so they can go off-roading. So I think they're trying to cover the gambit of potential buyers.
Yeah,
So
makes sense. Yeah, good gas mileage. That's one thing about it. Now, one of the events your club likes to host is the old school drag racing. Now, sadly,
Yeah.
this year's races were canceled because of the airport construction that's taking
Correct.
place. But can you explain how the races work and when and where they normally take place?
Okay, normally they take place at the end of June, a selected weekend at the end of June, out at the Lethbridge Airport. How it started, it was interesting, or I shouldn't say that. It's kind of a throwback to what they used to do back in the 50s and 60s, which was a simple two guys rolling up to a chalk line on the street, person standing back and dropping their arms in the way they go, and then two guys at the other end watching to see who wins. It's just that's the old school part of it. And we kind of went back to that. We haven't seen that in Southern Alberta for a long time. And our club said, hey, we could do this. Again, I'll refer to some of our members have been a part of the community a long time, so they know a lot of people and who to chat with. So we got it rolling with the city and with the airport and the county, and we made it happen, and it was a tremendous success. Got lots of great feedback from the community, the city, the county, the airport, and the participants. They just thought it was the greatest.
Now, what's
So
the
we've been-
fastest time you've actually seen a car go in a quarter mile?
Myself, the fastest time in a quarter mile. See, we run 1/8 out at the airport. 'Cause it's too short to run a quarter mile.
Oh, okay.
But I mean, I was at this drag races up at Edmonton, and I was seeing 6-second quarter miles. But
What?
yeah,
Wow.
Yeah.
Let me ask you something. Do you ever see any Teslas racing muscle cars?
Yep. Yeah,
And
there's a Tesla here in town, and he brings it out and he races the big power. Yes, he does.
how did the Teslas make out against the classic muscle cars?
Yes, and he does really well.
Wow.
Well, I mean, his car is an all-wheel drive electric, so it's instant torque off the line, where a V8 takes time to build the torque up. There's a couple seconds for it to go from its idle state to its highest RPM state. Where Tesla or any electric is instant. So that's the advantage they have.
You know, I've been to Veradero, Cuba a couple of times, and I've seen a lot of the 1950s, 57 Chevys, 55 Fords, and I look like these are beautifully restored cars, gorgeous cars. But then you pop open the hood, and they're little diesel motors inside under the hood, right? So I'm wondering, with some of the classic, even muscle cars, would people consider putting an electric motor inside, retrofitting electric motor?
Depends who you talk to. To us, traditional.
Not the purists.
Purists. Well, I mean, if you're a hot rod or a custom builder, you're not really a purist, because you're mixing parts and pieces from different cars to make your own car. But moving to the electric landscape, that is kind of a no-no in our custom culture. I think it's a pretty interesting concept. We have seen electric cars done. There was a 57 Chevy done for an automotive show. It's called SEMA in Vegas. It was interesting. There was a number of years ago, there was a 32 Ford Roadster done with an electric. But it's, and there is kits where you can buy and do this kind of thing, but it really hasn't hit mainstream. You kind of, it's almost frowned upon. So, yeah.
So Tal, any final thoughts you'd like to share with our viewers who may consider getting involved with your car club?
Well, we meet the first Tuesday of every month. If you're interested in the club, go online, just Google LeBaron's Car Club. You'll find us. There's a contact in there. You send an email and we'll get back to you, give you some more information, and see if it fits who you are.
Tal Meininger is with the LeBaron's Car Club here in Lethbridge. Tal, thanks so much for your time today.
Anytime. Thank you very much.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless and thanks for watching.